Remember those clean buses and matatus that promised to save us from matatu chaos? That was Swvl, the app that came to Nairobi like a shiny new shoe, promising cheaper and calmer commutes. Then in a blink, it paused. It laid off staff and then it disappeared. Today we are tracing that whole roller coaster, the big dream, the fast expansion into Kenya, the boardroom fireworks, and why it all fizzled. Swvl didn't start in Nairobi. It started in Cairo in 2017, founded by Mustafa Kandil and two friends. The basic idea was simple and sexy. Use tech to organize private buses and fixed route shuttles so that commuters could book seats on clean vehicles instead of playing the matatu roulette. This was the pitch. Cheaper than taxi, cleaner than public matatu, and more reliable than waiting for the Buddha guy. The company scaled fast. They raised big rounds, and by 2019, they were moving into new countries like a startup on espresso shots and investor love. So let me explain SPAC and IPO in simple terms. An SPAC is like a blank check company that buys a startup so that the startup can join the stock exchange faster. It's quick, messy, and comes with big expectations. Basically, investors expect fast growth or they get mad. Swvl launched in Nairobi in the early 2019, rolling out a few routes and promising to fix commuting. They brought tidy buses, predictable routes, and even free Wi-Fi on some buses. They partnered with BRCK at one point. They reportedly pumped serious money into the Kenyan market. Media at the time, they talked about multi-million investments to scale routes and marketing. Kenya was attractive because Nairobi's traffic pain is real and commuters would pay for reliability. So this is what Swvl offered locally. So first of all, there was the Swvl Daily, which was scheduled intra-city buses routes, your daily commute. Then there was the Swvl Travel, and these ones, they were longer city-to-city routes, like Nairobi to Nakuru, etc. Then there was Swvl Business, and this one was corporate shuttles for companies. And then Swvl also had carpool or other models. These ones were just additional features that they tested. It was all neat and user-friendly. You book via an app, you pay, you show up at a timetable, and then you just sit down, no fair bargaining, as in it was just simple. At first, people liked it. Commuters with regular office hours, they loved the reliability. Swvl had tech, a good brand, and the cash, the VC, to advertise like mad. They expanded routes quickly and even tried long-distance travel deals. There were crazy discounts to build users. I know you remember those discounts and the free rides. But Kenya's transport system is not a blank canvas. It's a living ecosystem, matatus, conductors, regulators, agencies, and unions. Swvl's modern solution looked great on paper, but on the ground, there were pushbacks. Now let me explain why matatus matter before we continue. A matatu isn't just transport, it's employment, culture, and cash. If Swvl took passengers, it cut into that income stream. So matatu people watched closely and sometimes they resisted change. Swvl had regulatory run-ins. In 2019, there were pause orders and NTSA, Kenya's transport body, it questioned how these new buses fit the rules. Some routes got suspended, then approvals were negotiated. Swvl eventually got things sorted with NTSA and resumed operations. But the back and forth showed that startup speed collides with government red tape. You can't scale a bus fleet smoothly without working with regulators. And early on, Swvl learned that the hard way. Backed by VC cash, Swvl went big. In 2021, they announced a merger with an SPAC, Queen's Gambit, that would list them on Nasdaq, valuing the company close to 1.5 billion shillings in the headlines. That SPAC deal was supposed to give them hundreds of millions to expand faster. IPOs add pressure. New public investors expect growth and fast. That's exciting if you can grow profitably, but it's dangerous if you burn cash. Again, let me explain unit economics. Unit economics is like asking, for every person you carry, do you make or lose money? If each ride costs you more, there's the drivers, buses, fuel, maintenance. If all that is more than the fare, growth is just a fancy spending. After going public, things soured. Swvl announced large layoffs in May 2022, cutting about 32% of its workforce. Then a few months later, they paused the daily and travel services in Nairobi. This was in June 2022. The public reason was a global economic downturn and cost pressure. The company had grown fast with heavy spending. There was the marketing, fleet leases, on-the-ground ops, and when macro conditions tightened, the model showed cracks. There were still extra hits. There were more layoffs later in 2022. There were cancelled acquisitions and portfolio retrenchments as Swvl tried to cut costs and stay afloat. The stock price crashed. Investor patience faded, the ambitious valuation evaporated. Lots of startups learned the same brutal lesson. Scale without profits is fragile. This is why the math failed. Think of Swvl like renting buses, paying drivers, cleaning, fueling, and also paying a tech team to build the app. If fares shrink or riders disappear, hello COVID and remote work, the fixed costs still burn. That's why an asset-heavy or asset-dependent expansion can choke when revenue drops. In Kenya, Swvl posted the consumer services in June 2022. That's when the daily and travel was stopped, but corporate services lingered. Some reporting says the company effectively seized inter- and intra-city consumer operations in Kenya, keeping only the B2B or corporate offer. In plain words, the part that the public used to ride on was paused. The bit selling shuttle solutions to companies, that one tried to survive. Later filings and company moves show that Swvl restructured globally and reconsidered its consumer play in many markets. Documents filed with regulators note decisions about Swvl entities in Kenya and other countries during the late 2022. It was part of a big retrenchment. By late 2024, the company had removed daily and travel consumer services from its website and presented a new brand focusing on enterprise and government mobility solutions. So the shift was clear, from running buses for everyday commuters to selling mobility tech and fleet management to businesses and cities. The CEO denied total consumer shutdowns, but the public product offering changed. There were also later headlines about bankruptcy claims and continued financial trouble, and the company reported sizable losses in parts of 2024, showing the recovery was far from smooth. Now let me take a pause and explain B2B and B2C. B2C, that is business to consumer, is you and me buying rides. B2B or B2G is selling software and contracts to businesses or governments to manage fleets. B2B has steadier contracts and fewer marketing costs. It's less sexy for users, but often healthier margin-wise if you can land big deals. Swvl didn't fail completely. It showed that tech could package scheduled, predictable shuttle services, and it pushed conversations about fleet management tech, corporate mobility, and data-driven routing. Companies in Kenya saw the idea that routes can be optimized, payments digitized, and corporates could contract shuttles instead of paying taxis. Swvl's pivot to enterprise also means that some of the tech and talent they built, all that could help cities later. So even in the pause, there are some seeds planted. Yeah, that's it on Swvl. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.